Anyway, Genesis chapter 10 and verse number 1. Let's pray. Lord, teach us now. Show us something in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, these are the generations of the sons of Noah. And as we mentioned, this phrase, these are the generations of, appears 10 times in Genesis. If you get Henry Morris Defender's Study Bible, somebody said, Brother Hovind, what Bible do you recommend? Well, absolutely King James. Now, the notes at the bottom, though, come by different people. Henry Morris did a fabulous job. He's dead now, but Institute for Creation Research, ICR.org. It is his notes at the bottom of the page are fabulous generally. A few exceptions, I would say, no, Henry, you're wrong there. But as a general rule, they're fabulous. And the Defender's Study Bible is, I've worn out 4 or 5 of them. They're up here on the shelf. So I really highly recommend that with a few caveats. So this phrase, he has got a whole section under Genesis chapter 2, verse 4. The first time that phrase appears, these are the generations of. That phrase appears 10 times in the Bible. And apparently it's somebody signing off and a new person taking over as author. So these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, Japheth. They would have written chapters 6, 7, and 8, and 9. They were there. They were on the ark with Noah. So these 3 boys would have written those chapters, and now it's going to take over with a new author, probably Abraham's father, Terah. Because later on in chapter 12 it says these are the generations of Terah. Okay, and the style of writing is different in each of these. They tell me in the Hebrew, you can tell this is a new author writing. And it is. But it doesn't mean it's a plagiarized book. It means it's all eyewitness accounts. Now, some other people may have written down accounts of the flood before these guys did. Or they have actually written it before that, but it doesn't mean they got it right. A police officer knows when you come to an accident, the first person to tell his testimony may or may not have it right. The first one is not more important because it's first. They may not have all the details. Okay. And unto them were sons born after the flood, the sons of Japheth, and it names a whole bunch of these guys, okay? And the sons of Ham, and it names a whole bunch of these guys, including, now one of Ham's descendants was Nimrod. It says he began to be a mighty one in the earth. We'll see more about him in chapter 11. Because chapter 11 goes back and fills in more details of chapter 10. It's a typical literary device where you give the big picture first and then go back and fill in the details. Nimrod began to be a mighty one. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Boy, there have been 40 different theories proposed on what that means. One is he was a hunter of the dinosaurs, killing them off because they were still there. One is he was a hunter of souls, and he became, first person to worship the devil. Could be, I don't know. But there are several theories. I don't think it gives us enough. But we do know God had told them, spread out. And Nimrod led the group that said, no, we're not going to follow God. We're going to stay here and build a tower. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel. We'll see in chapter 11 about the Tower of Babel. And out of that city they built Nineveh. Later on we see Jonah went to Nineveh, and God says, we're going to wipe out this city. And Jonah was excited about it because the Ninevites were wicked, evil people. They would tie people up and skin them alive and see how long they would live screaming before they died. I mean, unbelievable tortures the Ninevites would do, and they hated the Jews. Now, Nineveh is in what today would be, I don't know if it's in Syria or in Iraq. It's right near that border there, the city of Nineveh. But when Jonah was told by God, go tell the Ninevites I'm wiping them out in 40 days, Jonah said, I don't even want to warn them, and he left and went the other way. And God sent him to Wales Seminary for a couple days, and he got the message, okay, I got it, Lord, I'll go, reluctantly. So he went to Nineveh, preached to them, and they repented. And he was so angry that they repented that he went and sat under a juniper tree and, sat under a bush came up over him. Long story in the book of Jonah. But that's Nineveh. This really started shortly after the flood with the sons of Ham, the Hamites. Okay, the kingdom was Nineveh. And it got a whole bunch more names in here of the sons of Ham. These are the sons of Ham after their families. And then unto Shem, the father of the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth the elder. Here's where it tells us Japheth is the elder, even though he's not listed first. So it's not always the eldest son that gets the blessing or the birthright, like we see Jacob and Esau. Esau was the elder, but Jacob loved God, and Esau loved the flesh. So God chose Jacob. We got the sons. Jacob had 12 sons, and the fourth one, Judah, became the progenitor of the line of Jesus Christ. It wasn't the first. Okay, and Arphaxad begat Selah, and Selah begat Eber, And unto Eber were born 2 sons. The name of the one was Peleg. For, meaning because, in his days was the earth divided. And his brother's name was Joktan. Well, Joktan in the Hebrew language means shorten, to make shorter. So Peleg and Joktan, nobody else gets their brother mentioned in this chapter. It's always just the one, or generally just the one. Why is his brother mentioned? What's this have to do with anything? And what was divided in the days of Peleg? Well, there's several theories about that. Unto Eber were born 2 sons. The name of the one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided. If you look at my timeline chart, I got a couple of, this is the new version of it here with different color coordination. Hang on, let me get one without tape all over it. You can get these for placemats when your skeptic friends come for lunch. But right after the flood, you got Noah, Shem, Arphaxad, Selah, Eber, and Peleg. I got him in a box down here. There's Peleg right there on the chart. Notice Peleg only lived to be 239 years old. His daddy was 464. His grandpa was 433, 438, 600, 950. What's happening in the days of Peleg? Well, there's a couple of theories about that. One theory is, it says something was divided. It says in his days was the earth divided. One theory is the languages and nations were divided at the Tower of Babel. Keep in mind, Peleg is coming through the line of Shem. Ham, Shem's brother, also had kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids. So it would have been about the same time frame that Peleg was alive that Nimrod was alive. And so it doesn't give the dates, though, for Ham's descendants. It does give us the dates for Shem's and how old they were when their kids were born. So you can't really make a chart like this from the Bible because there are no dates given for Ham or for Japheth, only for Shem. Okay. And I apologize for the clearing the throat. Since I've been in prison, this has been going on, brother. I've tried everything to fix it except amputation. I'm going to do that last. Okay. The languages and nations were divided. This is one reasonable theory and probably true, but other things may also be true. The people would move away from each other, so the earth was divided up because of the language barrier. Second theory says the continents moved and split apart. I don't believe that, but there are some Christians who teach that after the flood in the days of Noah, in the days of Peleg, the continents broke apart even more and spread. I don't think that, because if you move a continent 6 inches, you're going to kill everybody. Probably on the planet, you know, the shock wave, the tidal wave, etc. The third theory says the waters came up from probably ice melting and divided the high spots into islands and continents. Now, I happen to believe very strongly that the Bible teaches before the flood came, there was a canopy of ice above the atmosphere, probably 2 or 3 fingers thick, like Josephus said. There's Josephus' book right there, brother, if you want to look at that. He said, yeah, there was a crystalline canopy above the atmosphere. Well, if you took today's air, which is, say, 60 miles thick, squeezed it down to 10 miles, people on the surface wouldn't care. I mean, you can't reach up 10 miles. But it would increase air pressure, probably 15, 20%, maybe 30, 40, 50%. I don't know. Ice being super cold ice is magnetic. So when the fountains of the deep broke open, the earth cracked up and the ice or water went shooting up like a bullet, carrying with it rocks and things, debris from the sides of the crack that would get wider. We covered that the other day. That stuff would go up and shatter this canopy. Then, because of the Earth's magnetic field, the ice would tend to be sucked in and dumped around the poles. So there would be huge ice caps dumped rapidly on the North and South Pole because of the Earth's magnetic field. It is interesting to note, I cover this on DVD number 6, the glacial effects we see around the North Pole, they came clear down to Kansas City, Missouri. The ice age is centered around the magnetic North Pole, not the geographic North Pole. We spin around this one, but there's a magnetic North Pole which moves around. But right now, when this globe was made, the magnetic North Pole was in Canada, and it'll be on a map. You can see where the magnetic North Pole is. And that seems to be the center of where the ice dumped, because it didn't come as far down into Russia as it did into America. Who cares? Well, if you had a bunch of ice dumped at the North and South Pole at the beginning of the flood, this would take hundreds of years to melt back. It was clear down to Kansas City. As it melted back, this is going to raise the ocean levels. So right after the flood, the oceans were probably smaller because so much water was trapped in ice. The fourth theory says they decided to survey the land to avoid fighting over it. And said, hey, let's draw a line, let's build a fence, this is my property, that's your property, stay over there and I'll stay over here. At some point, as the population increases, you're going to have to do this. If 50 people shipwrecked on an island, they would the first couple of months worry about survival, what are we going to eat, and then pretty soon they'd set up a government and say, okay, who's in charge? And then they would divide the land. And this is my coconut tree, this is your coconut tree. Draw some lines, even make some fences, That's standard, civilization 101. So it could be that that's what happened in the days of Peleg. If you read the book of Jasher, can you see it on the top shelf? One of those is a yellow book, the book of Jasher. I should have got that down. Go in the corner, maybe the corner shelf. I think it's up there. Hey, we'll get it later. It doesn't matter. Forget it. I do have it, though. And the two books of Enoch. I think they're on the very top shelf. Is Jasher there, too? Don't see it? Oh, I think somebody took that to read the other day. Okay. Well, here, thank you. There are 3 books of Enoch, actually. People say, what do you think about the book of Enoch? I say, which one? The book of Enoch or the 3 books of Enoch? Okay, there are 3 of them. But in the book of Jasher, it says, the Bible does mention Jasher twice. It mentions it in first in Joshua and in 2 Samuel. Now, I don't know if the book of Jasher mentioned in those 2 books in the Bible is this book or not. Somebody may have read 2 Samuel and said, oh, hey, book of Jasher. I'm going to write one and claim it's the one from the Bible, and I can get my special doctrines in there. Like Pray to Mary or something like that. So it could be what's called a spurious book. There was a book of Jasher. I don't know that this is it. However, this book says, these are the generations of Shem. Shem begat Arpachshad, which probably is Arphaxad, and Arphaxad begat Shelach, which probably is Shelah, and Shelach begat Eber, and unto Eber were born 2 children. The name of the one was Peleg, for in his days the sons of men were divided, and in the latter days the earth was divided. And the name of the second was Yoktan, which in King James is Joktan, meaning that in his day the lives of the sons of men were diminished and lessened. Well, Joktan means shortening. Certainly we can see that in the days of Peleg, lifespans were shortened. They went from 400 to 200. At least that was shortened. Now why? There's a couple dozen theories about why things were shortened in the days of Peleg. Now if you get the book of Jubilees, is that up there, same shelf? Book of the white and black? Book of Jubilees. I got it in here somewhere. I got 10 minutes. And this is only half my library, but the rest is still out there in the sharing the light truck. I like to read. But anyway, the book of Jubilees says, in the 6th year thereof she bore him a son, and he called his name Phalak, which probably is Phares. And in the days of he was born, the children of Noah began to divide the earth among themselves. Well, now here's a reasonable reason to believe that the earth was divided means they were dividing it up among themselves, picking real estate. I'll take this section, I'll get this country, and you get that country. Now, the book of Jubilees may or may not be correct. It's not part of Scripture, that's for sure, but it's an interesting ancient book. And on this account, he called his name Phalak, and they divided the earth among themselves. So maybe that's what's going on in the days of Peleg, is they're dividing the earth geographically, drawing some lines, okay? So I know that as the ice would melt back, that would automatically raise the ocean levels. I mean, when ice melts, the water runs in and to some place. Where's it go? It's going to fill in the oceans. The oceans have 2 very distinct parts to them. They have a deep part called the abyss, and then the shallow part called the continental shelf. You walk out a couple 100 miles and then drops off. What is this line out here? Well, that's the old beach line. That's where the beach used to be. If you raise the oceans a couple 100 feet, you get what we have today. But if you could lower the oceans a few 100 feet and freeze all that water and stick it on the North and South Pole, make giant ice caps, you'd have smaller oceans and bigger continents, and everything would be connected. This is England, Ireland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, France, Spain. All of this area right here is really shallow water. This was a problem during World War II because there wasn't really deep enough water to hide submarines very well. They like deep water where they can get down and get away from the depth charges, okay? If you lowered the oceans 100 feet, I think it's 100 feet, this becomes the beach line way out here. So Ireland and England would be one big landmass and part of France. The English Channel, the deepest place is only 150 feet. That's the deepest place. So and the oceans average 12,000 feet deep. Taking 100 or 200 feet of water out of the oceans is really insignificant as far as vertical displacement. Freezing that water, sticking it on the poles, is going to effectively connect everything. You could walk from France, jump over the creek, and go to Iceland. And from Iceland to Greenland, and Greenland to America. There was a huge land bridge. So when Noah's family and the critters got off the ark, they probably had 100 years or 200 years to move around the world wherever you're going to go, because Peleg was born 100 years after the flood. So if those ice caps were melting back, which is, I think, a reasonable theory, it's going to raise the ocean level. Now, at some point, the Atlantic Ocean is going to get full enough that it's going to spill over right here and start filling in what today is the Mediterranean Sea. I think the Straits of Gibraltar were probably washed out 100 years after the flood. Well, during that 100 years, people built cities. And then pretty soon the water started coming up. Where's that coming from? Somebody over here would build a city and not realizing that 800 miles away, the dam broke. And it's going to fill in. And the Mediterranean would finally spill over here between Sicily and Africa and come over and fill in the eastern Mediterranean. Underwater cities are found all over that area. Somebody was building. I would suspect they didn't build it underwater. I think they built it when it was not underwater, and it got filled in later. There's some huge cities that were built underwater in what today is off the coast of India. Same thing. There's a continental shelf around that area. So here they are exploring the U-shaped structure blocks at the seabed of Mahabalipuram, India. Okay? So as this water spilled in, it would eventually fill in the Mediterranean and then spill in right here, the Straits of Bosporus in Turkey. That is why they find underwater cities in the Black Sea. In the summer of 2000, ancient cities were discovered under 150 feet of water in the Black Sea, indicating sea level was lower sometime in the past. I agree. And I think it was probably a couple hundred years after the flood. It would take a while for all that ice melt to fill in the ocean first, and then fill in the Mediterranean, and then fill in the Black Sea. So during those first few hundred years, people would build cities. And that's why we have a continental shelf. So people say, how did the animals get from Australia to the Ark? Well, first place, they didn't have to. They were all living all over the world. They didn't have to come from Australia. Or how did kangaroos get to Australia after the flood? Well, they hopped. That's how they get everywhere. They would hop to Australia, and then slowly the water comes up. See, kangaroos and koalas are less aggressive than tigers and bears. So they would tend to give up their territory. I mean, when a bear moves in, he kind of gets that property, and you move on. You don't fight with him. So the less aggressive animals would be driven away, and over the first few hundred years, there would be a migration wave away from Noah's Ark, just simply for real estate purposes. And the kangaroos ended up in Australia at the same time as the water's coming up, and now they're isolated. They're an island. Now, it's only about 100 feet deep, the water between Australia and Vietnam. Just Google the Java Sea or look at Indonesia. It's not very deep around there. So they just happened to be trapped and rescued from the predators. And they developed into unusual kinds of kangaroos. I don't know how many there are. But kangaroo is one of the only mammals that never stops growing. Reptiles never stop growing, but neither do kangaroos. Interesting. Who cares? Anyway, so I think you're not going to understand oceanography or geology until you understand the flood and how that tied in. So, verse 31. These are the generations of Shem, after their families, after their tongues, in their lands, after their nations. All four things were divided in the days of Peleg. Maybe because of the Tower of Babel, which would have been about the same time. Maybe because of the rising water levels from ice melt. Maybe all of the above. These are the families of the sons of Noah after the generations in their nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood.